All right, what's up, everybody? Andrew Mahone here with Darium's Competitive Pokemon, here to talk about an exciting new archetype from the Crimson Invasion set. We are talking about Buzzwole GX Garbodor. I think this deck is super sweet. It's got a lot of cool stuff going on. This is my first draft of the list, maybe second draft of the list. I've been fooling around with it a little bit this week with some of my friends, and I think the deck has a lot of potential. It does have some rough spots. There are some weaknesses to it so far that I've been able to kind of identify, but I think that the deck definitely has promise. It reminds me a lot of Golisopod Garbodor in just that the deck is very self-sustainable. Only takes one energy really to start applying a lot of pressure to the opponent's Pokemon, and just kind of this raw power kind of deck. It uses the same kind of Guzma and Acerola strategy to really haze the opponent, target down specific things on your opponent's side of the field, and has this kind of similar cast of like Garbodor. You got some friends in here, and I think that the deck just operates in a similar way to Golisopod Garbodor, but I think that I like the deck much more than I liked Golisopod Garbodor. I saw Golisopod Garbodor was a little bit frail and that it could get end at the end of the game, and that really bothered me, and I also just didn't like that it had a really bad fire matchup too. This deck's fire matchup is maybe a little suspect as well, but not quite as bad. So we're just going to be taking a look at this early list for Buzzwole Garbodor. Excited to just get this out there. People start testing with it. Let me know what you guys think of Buzzwole Garbodor, what kind of improvements you might make based on your testing, and where do we go with the future of our standard format from here. So to start things off, we do have 3 copies of Buzzwole GX that Darium was able to pull in his first 2 boxes, so that's pretty exciting. Got 1 Tapu Fini GX, 1 Espeon EX, 1 Trashalanche Garbodor, and 2 Ability Garbodors. We have 3 Trubbish and 3 Tapu Lele GX. So let's talk about these guys pretty quick. First of all, we got our 3 Buzzwole GX. Buzzwole GX is your main attacker in this deck, and you're going to be using that Jet Punch attack just to pile on damage onto the opponent's side of the field as early as the first turn of the game. Jet Punch does 30 damage to your opponent's active Pokemon and 30 damage to one of their bench Pokemon. You could say, there is Mr. Mime in format, which would prevent this card from being very good. However, you do have your Garbotoxin Garbodor, which can pretty easily shut down Mr. Mime's abilities. Combined with the amount of tools that we run in this deck, you should be pretty fine as far as locking your opponent out of their ability usage like Mr. Mime, and you should be able to get the full effect out of Jet Punch on a regular basis. At first, I was very skeptical of Buzzwole's other 2 attacks. I thought Jet Punch, maybe would be the only attack you ever used with Buzzwole, but the more I found myself playing this deck, the more I found that you will use attacks like Knuckle Impact and Absorption GX more than you might have previously thought. It's not very difficult to pull off a Knuckle Impact, which can easily do 180, 200 damage with a couple of strong energies on there, on maybe the 3rd or 4th turn of the game. If you just get a Buzzwole with a regular fighting energy out there in the front, and then just start piling on other fighting energies onto the bench, you can find, especially if you're putting forth a lot of early aggression, maybe your opponent fumbles to set up, or maybe they're playing a slower deck, you'll find yourself using Knuckle Impact, more than you might have thought. So this deck does have some pretty cool one-hit knockout capabilities with that Knuckle Impact attack. That being said, there are not a lot of other big one-hit knockout options for this deck outside of Knuckle Impact and maybe Trashalanche Garbodor at the end of the game. So you do have to be aggressive with this deck. You do have to wear your opponent down early with Jet Punch, or you are going to be out of luck if your opponent gets up and rolling without any damage on anything on their side of the field. We also play 1 copy of Tapu Fini GX. Tapu Fini GX is here for that Tapu Storm GX attack, which is just really good. Say your opponent is able to get a quick Gardevoir GX with just a lot of energy on it. Maybe they were able to Field Blower your Town. You couldn't get your Buzzwole GX out on the first turn of the game, and they are just going to steamroll your team with a Gardevoir GX that is just massive and untouched. If that kind of thing were to happen, you could Tapu Storm GX, just toss it back into the deck. Likewise, if your opponent has has a Volcanion or a Turtonator or something like that with just a lot of energy on it, and they're just ready. Maybe they max elixired and they're going to roll through your team. You could just Tapu Storm GX that back into the deck. I really like Tapu Storm GX for just pumping the brakes on your opponent if they happen to get going too quickly. Maybe they use their Field Blower so that it could accelerate energy with Garbodor GX. Then you can lock the abilities back up, Tapu Storm the opponent, and then it's going to be less likely that they're going to be able to find the Field Blower they need to be able to charge up another Garbodor GX after they get it out and going. So I think Tapu Fini GX is very useful for that, just slowing down the opponent if they happen to get a big attacker out early that is clean and has not been jet punched, that cannot be devolved. Speaking of devolved, Espeon EX is very good in this list for that Miraculous Shine attack, just being able to lift up all of your opponent's Pokemon. Jet Punch in combination with Miraculous Shine, in combination with Po-Town, just forms a very potent archetype. I mean, just being able to constantly pick up your opponent's evolution Pokemon. We play Garbodor, so even if your opponent is playing something like Magearna in a metal deck, you're going to be able to shut off that ability and use Miraculous Shine to pick up your opponent's Pokemon. Reveal their weaker, Pokemon that are underneath them, and hopefully take knockouts with the damage that you have spread onto your opponent's side of the field. Espeon EX is very good for that. We do play Rainbow Energy, so we technically have access to Psyshock, but you're never really going to be using that in this deck. We play a 3-2-1 split of Garbodor in this list. Just one Trash Lance Garbodor, since we are playing Fighting Fury Belt in this list. So Trash Lance Garbodor is not going to be getting quite as much mileage as your ability Garbodor. It is here just because at the end of the game, you want to be able to punish your opponent if they have played too many item cards. We play the Rainbow Energy already for the Tapu Fini. We also play it for this Garbodor, so we have two uses to get out of that Rainbow Energy. Tapu Cure GX is a third, but two primary uses for that Rainbow Energy here. And like I said, we play Fighting Fury Belt because Fighting Fury Belt just goes so well on Buzzwole GX, boosting that massive Pokemon GX up into a 230 hit point range. Very difficult for the opponent to knock out. So because we've made that choice with Fighting Fury Belt, I don't think that the Trash Lance Garbodor is quite as good in this list, though still very good as a one-of. Primarily, we want to use our Garbotoxin Garbodors to shut off the opponent's abilities so they cannot do things like Accelerate Energy, so they cannot do things like use Greninja Break's Giant Water Shuriken. You don't want or Feather Arrow, you don't want any of that going on when you're playing a Buzzwole deck. You want to just go, attack for attack, Jet Punch. Can they do as much damage as you can while you are just manually attaching to a Buzzwole? They probably will not. Most decks cannot keep up with just the raw damage output of Buzzwole GX if they do not have some sort of ability to complement them. So we use Garbodor in order to shut down the opponent's abilities, really lock them up, make things awkward for them while we continue to pile on damage with Buzzwole. Then, to wrap things up, we do play 3 copies of Tapu Lele GX, though not quite as useful in this list because you do not have access to Energy Drive, really. I mean, you do technically. You could attach 2 regular energies to it, but we do not play double colorless energy, so Energy Drive is not going to be as good. However, Wonder Tag is just still essential for being able to hand select supporters out of the deck, especially cards like Acerola, Guzma, Sycamore, and it's all very good with Wonder Tag. And then we do have the option to Tapu Cure GX if you find yourself in a weird position where that would be the optimal play. Moving on to the supporters in this list, I'm pretty excited about the supporter layout we got going on. We have 4 copies of Professor Sycamore, 4 copies of N, 3 copies of Guzma, 3 copies of Acerola, 1 Bridget, and 1 Lusamine. Pretty excited because we do get to play 1 copy of that new supporter Lusamine, which I think goes pretty well in here. Our 4 Sycamore and 4 N are just bread and butter. Almost every deck in standard format is going to be playing these essential draw cards. Then we also have 3 copies of Acerola and 3 copies of Guzma. Guzma is just very powerful in this deck since you're going to be piling on a lot of damage early with that Buzzwole. A Buzzwole with a strong energy and a Fighting Fury Belt is doing a perfect 60 damage to the active. No matter if they are a non-EX or they are a GX or an EX, they're doing 60 damage no matter what. And they're going to be doing 30 to the bench. That strong energy Fighting Fury Belt combination does very well for knocking out things like Beldum or Vulpix or Ralts, right? Or even Rowlet, right? So you can knock out a whole lot of 60 hit point basic Pokemon with your Buzzwole. And Guzma just makes it so that you can target down ones specifically on your opponent's side of the field and just create a lot of pressure early on. Guzma is very good in this deck. Acerola, of course, is going to be great in here. I did experiment with some super scoop ups as well, but right now we're playing Acerola. It's just a sturdier card and more reliable, and just allows you to pick up your Buzzwole after it's taken a hit. We do play those Fighting Fury belts, making them very tanky Pokemon GX. 230 hit points is just a lot of hit points to deal with. Even 190 is a lot of hit points to deal with. If your Buzzwole takes a hit, you can Acerola, pick it up, and just lie it right back down with a strong energy in the Fighting Fury belt. Put a lot of pressure on your opponents to deal with it. So Acerola, great for reusing your Buzzwole GX. Something that I like about Buzzwole Garbodor as compared to Golisopod Garbodor is that it's easier to stream attacks with Buzzwole Garbodor. You can just apply a lot of pressure early, even without having a card like Acerola or Guzma, so you don't need to play 4 of either, especially with Lusamine, because Buzzwole could just keep plugging away with that Jet Punch attack, and it needs no maintenance. All it needs is the energy, and it is free to go. We do play 1 copy of Bridget in here, just great for getting your Pokemon GX, your basic Pokemon, out into play. You could easily grab a turn 1 Trubbish and a Buzzwole. Maybe if you suspect that you might need your Tapu Fini, you could grab that as well. Love Bridget in this deck. I mean, Bridget goes well in almost any deck, and just being able to get your Trubbish out is good. But since it is a pretty low maintenance Stage 1 deck, we do not need basics and Stage 1 deck. You don't really need 2 copies of Bridget in here at all. I do think that Lusamine is a very cool idea. I do like it in this list, especially for being able to reuse your Acerola, reuse your Guzma. A critique that I had of the Garbodor decks is that they don't have any additional draw support late in the game after you have, expelled a lot of your resources. You've locked things up with Garbodor. In order to pull off game-winning turns, you might need a couple extra copies of a supporter or something like that. Lusamine can just be that ace in the hole for you so that you could get back the game-winning Guzma or an Acerola or an N so that you could just play more copies of these supporters throughout the course of the game. And I think she's a very nice option for that. Since Garbodor is a slower archetype, I think Lusamine will shine in Garbodor decks since they tend to try and wear down the opponent. This way, you can make sure you recover your resources that you need to be able to pull a win out of the game, even after a long, grindy game where you're trying to wear your opponent out of resources themselves. That's it for the supporters. Moving on to the items. We do play 4 copies of Ultra Ball, which is very regular for almost every single deck. We play 4 copies of Floatstone for our ability Garbodors, but also to give us some mobility in the deck. 2 copies of Rescue Stretcher, 2 copies of Field Blower, 3 copies of Fighting Fury Belt, a Special Charge, and 4 copies of Potown. So, I do think that, Floatstone, fantastic in here. You're going to want to put that on your ability Garbodor just to be able to lock up abilities on your opponent's side of the field. But it's also good sometimes just to put on a Buzzwole since we don't really have any other switching options in here other than Floatstone and Acerola. So it is pretty good for that as well. We also play 3 copies of Fighting Fury Belt. I think I want a 4th in here or a Choice Band or something, just a 4th tool to be able to put on to Buzzwole, just since Buzzwole is so good with Fighting Fury Belt on. It's just so much better, and kind of like the same mentality that Volcanion was going under. Just the big basic decks are just so much better at what they do when the big basics have Fighting Fury Belt on them, and 4 Fighting Fury Belt is just a lot for your opponent's Field Blowers to be able to take care of. So I do think that, maybe a 4th Fighting Fury Belt in here maybe goes for the Special Charge or the 2nd Rescue Stretcher, something like that, if you're looking to put a 4th one in here, which I might suggest. But giving your Buzzwole 230 hit points is just insane, and I also like that it gives your Buzzwole that perfect 60 damage with the Fighting Fury Belt, even on non-EX, non-GX Pokemon. Sure, Choice Band is good for lopping on that extra 30 damage, but I think Fighting Fury Belt, just being able to do 60 damage to something like a Vulpix or a Ralts is just very good and not to be underestimated when you're using Jet Punch in combination with a strong energy and the Fighting Fury Belt. We do play 2 copies of Rescue Stretcher in here, and that's just because, Espeon is just so important to be able to get back if you've discarded it, because that is just such a game-winning card. So you want to have access to it kind of at any point, even if you at some point have to Sycamore it away. So 2 Rescue Stretcher is just the safe play in here. You could go down to 1, but I also like being able to get back that pretty thin Garbodor line that we play. If your opponent happens to really be hammering away on their item cards and you find that you maybe want to play 2 Trash Lance Garbodor throughout the course of the game, 2 Rescue Stretcher is really going to give you the flexibility to be able to pull that off, where 1 Rescue Stretcher might not be able to. 2 copies of Field Blower, very good for moving your opponent's Fighting Fury Belts. They're choice bands, things that are going to make it easier for them to be able to knock out your own Buzzwole. You want to keep them from doing that. Also, just if your opponent has any stadiums in play that happen to be benefiting them, or just things like Parallel City, anything that happens to be annoying, Field Blower disposes of very well. But it also throws your opponent's items or tools into the discard so that then you could Trash Lance for more damage later in the game. So I do like 2 copies of Field Blower for that. Po-Town is fantastic with Buzzwole, and I really think that this is just a perfect pairing here. When an opponent evolves their evolution Pokemon, they can put 30 damage on it if you have Po-Town in play, and then the fact that Buzzwole's Snipe does 30 damage too. 30 plus 30 adds up to the perfect 60 damage, which is what you need to evolve so many Pokemon in standard format. I've already mentioned, you got things like Eevee, it's got 60 hit points. Ralts has got 60 hit points. Beldum and Rowlet all got 60 hit points. Even Froakie's got 60 hit points. So lots of Pokemon got 60 hit points. That 30 damage Snipe from Buzzwole combination with the 30 damage of Po-Town really adds up. So just this all goes very well for creating win conditions with your Espeon EX, just putting a lot of damage on your opponent's side of the field and creating, situations that are going to allow you to win the game. We also play 1 copy of Special Charge in here. I'm a little iffy on this, not sure if it's totally needed. This is a card that could be cut for a 4th Fighting Fury Belt, absolutely, but it is a little safety net. I think Buzzwole is just so much better when it's using Strong Energy. So the Special Charge is just a little bit of a cushion to lean on, just so that you could throw your Strong Energy back into the deck should you find that you had to discard a couple. You special charge them back in and continue attaching them to your Buzzwole GX, since Strong Energy is by far the energy of choice. Rainbow Energy is going to do damage to your own Buzzwole. You don't really want to be attaching those to it, and the regular Fighting Energy just feels so weak in comparison when you have to attach a regular Fighting Energy to your Buzzwole GX. So Special Charge just keeps those strong energies flowing late into the game, and I do like it for that. Finally, we have the energy count. We are playing 4 copies of Strong Energy, just absolutely amazing on those Buzzwole GX. You really want to get these out as early as possible. I've even considered using a card like Energy Lotto just to be able to find them, because your Strong Energies are just that good early on in the game. Then we also play 4 copies of Rainbow Energy, just allowing us to use Trash Lance as well as Tapu Fini, just giving us some options outside of Buzzwole. I do like that. So we do play our 4 copies of Rainbow Energy. You could throw them back in with Special Charge. Maybe you could get away with just 3, but the whole point of the Tapu Fini is to kind of be that emergency brake. I think of it like an e-brake. If your opponent is really going way too fast and way too hard early on, you want to be able to have that Rainbow Energy to slap on to your Tapu Fini GX so that you can throw the opponent's Pokemon back into their deck. And then we do have 2 regular copies of Fighting Energy just to kind of buff out the Fighting Energy count, allow you to pull off some fancy tricks with Buzzwole's 2nd and 3rd attack as well, Knuckle Impact and Absorption GX. Being able to attach the basic fighting on really allows you to pull off these secondary attacks much easier, and having 10 energy in the deck also just means that you're going to be drawing them more often and giving yourself more options for Buzzwole later in the game. A couple other options I was considering for this list. I do think that maybe Shining Mew could be good in here. Shining Mew got that legendary guidance attack, which Shining Mew, you slap a Rainbow Energy on this thing. It's only got 20 hit points after you do that. However, being able to search out 2 Strong Energy and attach them onto a Buzzwole could be pretty crazy and create a turn 2 situation where turn 2 you are ready to start knuckle impacting for like 200 damage with a Pokemon that maybe if you find the Fighting Fury Belt has like 230 hit points. So Shining Mew could be very good in here. I was also talking to my friend Noel about this deck, and he's a fan of putting Drampa GX in combination with Buzzwole. Of course, if you were to play the Drampa GX in here, you would have to swap out some energy for some double colorless. You could play a thinner rainbow line. Maybe you only play, your 4 strongs and 3 rainbows, and then maybe 3 double colorless there, and then maybe you find a place in the rest of the deck for a 4th double colorless. Maybe you trim down the Buzzwole line and put a Drampa or 2 in here. Take out the Tapu Fini, put another Drampa. Then you have options to spread with Buzzwole, and then you could come in later with Berserk, or you could even activate Tapu on Tapu Lele GX as well. Just having double colorless in the deck means that Buzzwole can soften things up, while then you come in with Drampa or Tapu Lele later in the game and can sweep with their attacks using double colorless energy. I don't dislike that idea. I think that idea is fine. It's just not an idea that I've tested yet. So I decided to give you all the Buzzwole GX list that I have been working on at home. And I think this deck is pretty good. So let me know what you guys think of Buzzwole GX Garbodor in the comments below. Make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel. Peace.